You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Today we're going to take on religious establishments. That's what James Madison, the father of our Constitution, called them, and he was not flattering them. They do keep creeping back at us, no matter how many times over our history we have tried to make it clear we are a secular nation. My guest today has been here before, and she's always a pleasure to welcome back. Laurie Gaylor is founder and director of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, which is the largest organization of atheists, agnostics, and free thinkers in the United States, which does superb work and about which we'll hear more later. And yes, this week there's a surrealism corner and, of course, fighting words at the end of the program. But before any of that, and in observance of the new and important Gallup poll, we need to go, you and I, inside the headlines. Let me say at the outset that if any listeners are devoutedly religious, please understand that no individual offense is felt or intended by my following remarks. I respect your spirituality, if not always your belief system. You do know me by now. But I feel strongly that the United States was founded as a secular country, and that it must remain so. The encroachment of religious establishments, churches, synagogues, mosques, faith-based institutions, etc., some doubtless doing some good works, but many doing considerable damage, from child sexual abuse to cynical fundraising to influencing our legislative and legal systems in direct contravention to the Constitution of the United States. All these ought to be a matter of great concern, because the separation of church and state for the protection of both should be of crucial importance to the religious community as well as to the secular. That said, I confess that I do celebrate the recent Gallup poll, finding that U.S. church membership has fallen below 50% for the first time. Keep in mind that Gallup is a conservative pollster, and they have tracked Americans' membership in churches over the last 8 decades. The finding reflects the increasing number of Americans who expressed no religious preference whatsoever. Over the past 2 decades, the percentage of Americans who do not identify with any religion has grown from 8% in 1998 to 2000 to 13% in 2008 to 2010 and 21% over the past 3 years. Church membership is strongly correlated with age, as 66% of traditionalists, U.S. adults born before 1946, belong to a church, compared with 58% of baby boomers, 50% of Generation Xers, and 36% of millennials. So there definitely is a youth and generational element to the secular drift. But that does not fully explain those adults in the older generations who have also shown roughly a double-digit decrease from 2 decades ago. Furthermore, each generation has seen a decline in church membership among those who do affiliate with a specific religion. These declines have ranged between 6 and 8 points over the past 2 decades for traditionalists, baby boomers, and Gen Xers who identify with a religious faith. And in just the past 10 years, the share of religious millennials who are church members has declined from 63 to 50%. Perhaps most heartening, church membership is lower in each younger generation of conservatives than in each older generation. Church membership, in other words, is declining dramatically in all major subgroups, including the Latinx community. Interestingly, the decline in membership is steeper among Catholics, down 18 percentage points, than among Protestants, down 9 percentage points. That's kind of amazing since, the Catholics have so much better theater, all those smells and bells and candles. And furthermore, it's down even lower among political independents than among Democrats. And it's down 20 percentage points lower among women than among men. 18% for men. The general decline, especially among those who expressed no religious preference, is really encouraging because it presages a decline in sectarianism, which we all certainly could use. What's more, although precise numbers of church closures are elusive, a conservative estimate is that thousands of U.S. churches are closing each year. James Madison and Thomas Jefferson would be enormously relieved. It's time for our first break. When I was little, I actually used to pray to the Greek gods, to Artemis and Hera and Demeter and Aphrodite, because she was the goddess of love, so that seemed a good thing. And even to Apollo, because he was the god of poetry. Who knew? Anyway, we'll be back in just a moment with the rest of our show. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
If we're discussing religious establishments, you know that we must be in the surrealism corner. Now, this assembly of quotations is fun. It does not include most of the framers because I'm going to cover them toward the end of the program in Fighting Words, so these are more contemporaries and a few blasts from the past. This is a contemporary, Jane Wagner and Lily Tomlin. Why is it when we talk to God we're said to be praying, but when God talks to us we're schizophrenic? One thing I have no worry about is whether God exists, but it has occurred to me that God has Alzheimer's and has forgotten we exist. And the great Elizabeth Cady Stanton. So many quotes. In fact, she wrote the Women's Bible. The Bible and the Church have been the greatest stumbling blocks in the way of women's emancipation, teaching that women brought sin and death into the world. Marriage for a woman was to be a condition of bondage, maternity a period of suffering and anguish, and in silence and subjection she was to play the role of a dependent on man's bounty for all her material wants. Jehovah has never taken a very active part in the suffrage movement. The greatest obstacle we suffragists had to overcome was the Bible. It was hurled at us from every side. Here's a good one by Gene Roddenberry. That's the writer of Star Trek. Religions vary in their degree of idiocy, but I reject them all. For most people, religion is nothing more than a substitute for a malfunctioning brain. Edgar Allan Poe. All religion is simply evolved out of chicanery, fear, greed, imagination, and poetry. Lucretia Mott. The Suffragist. I resolved to claim for my sex all that an impartial creator had bestowed, which by custom and a perverted application of the scriptures had been wrested from women. Here's Matilda Jocelyn Gage. Of late, a rapidly increasing tendency has been shown towards the destruction of our civil liberties. The people forget that liberty must ever be guarded. They forget the hereditary enslavement, the bondage of the human will to the church. These are dangerous signs of the times as to the effort of the church to obtain increased power over the laity. Susan B. Anthony. I was born a heretic. I distrust those people who know so well what God wants them to do, because I notice that this always coincides with their own desires. George Carlin. I'm completely in favor of the separation of church and state. Those two institutions screw us up enough on their own, so both of them together is certain death. You could say, in general, that today's religions are tomorrow's ancient myths. Here's a nice one. If people are good only because they fear punishment and hope for reward, then we're a sorry lot indeed. Albert Einstein. If Jesus were alive today, the last thing he'd be was a Christian. That's Mark Twain. And this is Mark Twain, too. I do not fear death. I'd been dead for billions and billions of years before I was born and hadn't suffered the slightest inconvenience from it. Napoleon said, religion is excellent stuff for keeping the common people quiet. Religion is what keeps the poor from murdering the rich. Stephen Hawking, decades, in fact, a century or two later, said, I believe the simplest explanation is there is no God. No one created the universe, and no one directs our fate. This leads me to a profound realization that there probably is no heaven and no afterlife either. We have this one life to appreciate the grand design of the universe, and for that I am extremely grateful. Yeah, that's Stephen Hawking. And here's Harry Potter weighing in. Well, Daniel Radcliffe, the actor who played him. I'm not religious. I'm an atheist, and a militant atheist when religion starts impacting on legislation. This is Carl Sagan. Far more crime and war has been committed by zealots in the name of God, Jesus, and Mohammed than ever been committed in the name of Satan. And this one by Neil deGrasse Tyson. There are religions and belief systems and objective truths, and if we're going to govern a country, we need to base that governance on objective truth, not on a personal belief system. Darwin contributed this one. The true atheist stays silent. To give grounds for debate is only to harbor delusion further. And here's a witty one from Oscar Wilde. Religion is like a blind man looking in a black room for a black cat that isn't there and finding it. Catha Pollitt, a contemporary of ours, wrote, when you consider that God could have commanded anything he wanted, anything, the 10 Commandments have got to rank as one of the great missed opportunities of all time. How different history would have been had they clearly and unmistakably forbidden war, tyranny, taking over other people's countries, slavery, exploitation of workers, cruelty to children, wife-beating, stoning, treating women or anyone as chattel or inferior beings. Good for you, Catha. The reason people use a crucifix against vampires is the vampires are allergic to bullshit. That's Richard Pryor. I love this one from the Eskimo elders, the Aleut people. It's a statement, a question actually, by one of the elders to a priest. If I did not know about God and sin, would I go to hell? The priest answers, no, not if you did not know. The Eskimo then replies, then why did you tell me? And this great one from Toni Morrison. as assaults on and demands for school prayer, religious symbols on school property, control of course curricula, all become legal cases, invoking the separation of state and church. That legal journey both skirts and displays another question. Which values, in act or symbol, should a public institution of learning reject, endorse, or tolerate? Why should schools close on religious holidays? Why should they be called holly, as in holy days? Why permit houses of worship to participate in school and academic functions? I am merely suggesting how porous the separation of church and state is. These are the great debates of the 21st century, whether our or any notion of secular morality is universal, whether whole bodies of knowledge are secret agendas of oppression. One could argue that once churches put lightning rods on their steeples, the debate between science and religion, was over. One could also argue that it is virtually impossible to respect organized religion and women at the same time. That strikes me as surreal. Time for another quick break, and we'll return in just a second with Laurie Gaylor, our free thinker guest for the conversation. I do love the word free thinker. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
My guest for the conversation today is Laurie Gaylor, an American atheist, secular, and women's rights activist, and a co-founder of, and with her husband, Dan Barker, the current co-president of, the Freedom from Religion Foundation. She also is the author of several very interesting books, including Woe to the Women, The Bible Tells Me So, Betrayal of Trust, Clergy Abuse of Children, and, as editor, the stunningly important anthology Women Without Superstition, No Gods, No Masters. Here is Laurie Gaylor. Laurie, welcome back to the program. You're a recidivist.
Yes, thank you so much for having me back.
Oh, I'm very glad that you're back. And I rang you the other day to congratulate you about the recent Gallup poll, which I want to discuss. And then I also want to talk about what FFRF is doing in its court cases and to keep the church and the state separate in our country, which we've been through 4 rough years of that. Not happening. But let's start with the Gallup poll. Congratulations. Yes, the Gallup poll recently shows that the U.S. church membership has fallen below a majority for the first time ever. So is Freedom from Religion Foundation dancing in the aisles?
We are very pleased that the nation seems to be waking up. Gallup poll is one of the more conservative pollsters, and he's been doing these polls for 80 years.
Yeah.
And this is the first time that church attendance dropped to under 50%. And actually, church membership. And church attendance and membership tends to be wildly inflated anyway, because people tend to tell pollsters what they think they want to hear.
Right.
And I think that most Americans are, on a typical Sunday, unchurched. But we still see 65% of the country nominally Christian.
Uh-huh. Yeah, interesting.
And so, but it's very good to see that our country is finally becoming much more secular and About a quarter of the adult population identifies as non-religious or unaffiliated, and among young people, that jumps to 35%.
I know.
So that is a very heartening change in our nation.
We might actually become the nation that the framers intended. I'm going to talk about Madison elsewhere in the program, and Jefferson and the other framers and religious establishments, as they cynically called religious establishments. But one of the things that is exciting about the Gallup poll, and you're quite right, they're normally quite conservative, is that although there, declines in church membership have been greater over the past couple of decades among Eastern residents and among Democrats, those are expectable places. Nonetheless, political independents now have lower rates of church membership than Democrats do. That's very interesting. And also I found that what was interesting was that Catholics have a lower rate than Protestants, and that women were down 20 percentage points, and men were down 18 percentage points. That's the difference between 2018 and 2020, and then earlier years. So women are ahead of the case, as usual. You and I concur, being feminists, don't you think?
Yeah, well, so women are still holding up the pillars of the churches for the most part, but we're so glad to see that exodus. And of course, I think that, and you, I'm sure, would agree that religion is the great oppressor of women.
Yeah, I do.
And, asks everything of us and gives us nothing in return. And if we could devote our energies to making this world better, especially for other women, that would be far more productive than spending our time promoting institutional patriarchal churches.
Yeah. Oh, no question. I mean, I'm there with Elizabeth Cady Stanton, that the church is the greatest adversary of women that there ever was. So, but another thing about the Gallup poll that I found fascinating was that not only is the influence of generation apparent, as you mentioned, younger people are just having less of it or none of it, but also in the church membership is lower in each younger generation of conservatives than in each older generation. Those are conservatives. In other words, 51% of conservative millennials, 64% of conservative Gen Xers, 70% of conservative baby boomers, and 71% of conservative traditionalists in 2018-2020 belong to a church. That's among the reactionary far-right communities, so that's quite heartening, I find.
Yes, I hope so, unless they found the church of insurrection.
Well, that,
maybe they're
but if they
doing other things. But,
oh, you mean January 6th? Yeah.
Maybe not all of them are church members, but they are really part of a religious white supremacist
that's true.
Christian nationalist movement. But still, that it's very heartening.
Yeah. The Proud Boys apparently are very religious. Oh. And while precise numbers, according to Gallup, of church closures are elusive, a conservative estimate coming out of Gallup is that thousands of U.S. churches are closing each year. So the real estate...
And that is also very welcome.
Yeah,
but some of them, unfortunately, got taxpayer money, and the Catholic Church waltzed off with billions of dollars of PPP money, and they're complaining that they're having to close their doors and their donations are down, and that's why they're agitating to open during COVID-19, or the coronavirus pandemic. But they certainly got a lot of public money, and that was something that FFRF, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, vigorously opposes and protested. And unfortunately, our government looks poised, even under the Biden administration, to make permanent that churches can have access to small business administration money. So that's something we're working on.
Well, that brings me to where I was just about to go next, which is tell us some of the cases that FFRF has been engaging in recently or is about to.
Well, I am delighted to say that this week, in fact, just today, we are announcing that we have successfully ended a federal lawsuit in the state of Alabama, which was the only state in the country that has a religious test to register to vote. And I'm not making this up.
You're not.
You had
oh
to
my God!
swear. You had to swear an oath to God at the end of it. The online form wouldn't go through if you didn't click it. And when you went in person, they made you swear or affirm.
You are freaking kidding me! Oh my!
And we sued before the election in October with 4 or 5 plaintiffs, and we just got word that the state has finalized changing all the forms. They now make it optional. You have to opt out, but it says, I do not want to. And then when you go online, you don't have to do it anymore. We had a professor who was one of our plaintiffs who tried to register to vote online. And when he complained about this, they emailed him back and said, you can't register to vote unless you attest to that. So we have changed that as of this week. It's all done, and we have dropped our dismissed the case because we got what we wanted. And so we're very, very pleased about that, but kind of horrified that this religious test could have been a barrier.
Incredible. The framers would be spinning in their graves. I am hyperventilating with shock. A religious test in order to vote. Good.
So grief. That is to register to vote.
To register to vote.
That has been one, and we're really, really pleased. And actually, we've had a lot of victories in the last year. We've continued to win in court, even though one of our main concerns is expansion and correction of the federal judiciary, because Trump has appointed more than a third of them, or about a third of them, and of course a third of our Supreme Court. And there was just a legal study that was announced this week in the New York Times that was pointing out how extreme they really are. Yeah. And one of the ways we're seeing this is with these decisions on the pandemic, where they're, siding with churches that are saying that these social distancing rules and masking rules, etc., should not apply to churches, that it abrogates their free exercise of religion. But we are poised to see so many other worse decisions. We had 3 very bad decisions by the Supreme Court last summer, even before we lost Ginsburg. And she was replaced by, Amy Coney Barrett. And we are waiting for a decision any day now out of Pennsylvania that has to do with a Catholic charity suing the city because they don't want to place foster kids in LGBTQ homes, and saying that the rules, they should still have access to federal money and be able to be an arm of the state and still discriminate. And that, isn't looking like we're going to win that one. We have an amicus brief in that case. So court reform is one of our big pushes, and there's going to be a bill introduced in Congress about expanding the Supreme Court itself to 13 people. Yeah. And I really like that. 13 seems like a lucky number to me. Yeah,
it's the number of a witch's coven, so it's got to be lucky.
But it also is the number of, the reason behind it is that it's the number of appellate districts there actually are. And traditionally, we used to have one Supreme Court for each appellate district. Yeah. And so I don't know where that will go, but we are supporting it. And then we're looking at the lower judiciary, where you don't need an excuse to expand it. It hasn't been expanded for 20 or 30 years, and their caseload is horrible.
They're very overworked, yeah.
And, justice deferred is justice denied. People are sitting there waiting for their decisions. So I'm hoping that the Senate, somehow we can push some of these things through, because there will be
I think
bills introduced.
This stands a better chance, this approach, than recall. I mean, because periodically I've been fantasizing about recall votes, campaigns on all of these damn judges that Trump appointed, some who had no litigating experience, no courtroom experience, nothing. They just breezed in, and they're young and scary. But the expansion approach seems better. Whose bill is that
It's Representative Jones's bill. He is a new representative from New York, and he ran on court reform and expansion of the U.S. Supreme Court. He used to work in the Obama administration, in part dealing with the courts. Mondaire Jones is his name, but also
yes.
I think that Representative Nadler is signing on to the bill.
Well, he's my congressman. Yeah, he's a peach.
I'm pretty sure he's signing on, and so we hope this bill will get momentum. It's terribly important, and Robin, you know that abortion rights are really in jeopardy.
Hanging in the balance
to overturn it.
Totally hanging in the balance. I know.
Yeah, and we're hoping that the Supreme Court will hold off on that, but they have the vote, so it's really critical.
Well, also,
and of course that's a religious war.
That's right. I know, but I'm also hoping that the American public isn't so dense that it can't see through the fact that, for example, white evangelicals, the majority of evangelicals for that matter, but certainly white evangelicals, were totally sold out during the Trump years. They didn't care. They didn't care that he was thrice married and had multiple mistresses and had, they didn't care about his remarks about grabbing women's genitals. They didn't care about rape, him being a serial rapist. They didn't care about any of these things, or morals or ethics. They only cared about having power. And it would seem to me that people, who are sincere in their faith, it's not my faith, but it's their faith. And if they're sincere in their faith, you'd think that they would be, sincere in their faith. And of course, they were proven to be not so, or the vast majority of them were proven to be not so. They would be much happier.
They certainly ceded the moral high ground.
Exactly.
In favor of
the moral low ground, the low ground, the lowest ground you could possibly find. Yeah. And it seems that they're continuing to do so now with the grifting and all of the scandals that have come out since he's out of office. Fortunately, he's off the Twitter waves, and that is a great mercy to us all.
And yes, it is, and it's the kind of thing that will make an atheist like me say hallelujah.
I'll say, oh yeah, I will never forget your prayer breakfast where there was, instead of a moment of silence, a moment of bedlam.
Yes, our non-prayer breakfast.
Your non-prayer, yeah, exactly. Your non-prayer breakfast, and there was a moment of bedlam where everybody clinked their spoons on their glass, and I just thought it was delicious. It was very fun and joyful and utterly delightful. So I have very happy memories.
We're looking forward to having an in-person convention. Just don't know whether it will happen in November, but we do have Gloria Steinem and Margaret Atwood.
Oh, that's
and
wonderful.
John Irving.
That's wonderful.
If it happens.
That's wonderful. Well, I will make it very clear to them that they should, if it happens, they should be there, because it's the most fun possible event that you can have sitting up. So it's an absolute delight. Give my regards to Dan. Give my big hugs to you. And I will look forward to talking with you very soon on your telecast.
Yes.
You must mention that.
Yes, we're looking forward to Free Thought Matters. You're going to be on Free Thought Matters, our TV show that is airing in the New York City area and in 12 other cities on Sunday mornings, the Unsermon, and on YouTube. And we'll be talking to you soon.
I will be the unguest on the Unsermon Day. Much love to you, Annie Laurie, and thanks for all the wonderful, wonderful work that Freedom from Religion Foundation continues to do. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
And now it's time for our final break, but I'll return directly with some fighting words.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, it's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Talk radio with a brain.
At the founding of our country, the framers of the Constitution had fighting words all their own. remember what seemed to be a milder time, when the militant Christian right used to consist of James Dobson and Pat Robertson, denouncing Ellen DeGeneres for having come out as a lesbian and thus causing Hurricane Katrina, and Focus on the Family, and fanatics picketing abortion clinics. That was bad enough, but that was well before the heavily armed Oath Keepers swore allegiance to religion. Contrary to religionists' claims that secularism produces moral decay, secular societies, for example, France, Japan, the Scandinavian countries, have far lower rates of homicide, STDs, teen pregnancy, and abortion than the United States, with its high rate of religionists, unique among industrialized Western nations. Similarly, the more secular blue states in the U.S. have lower rates of divorce, infant mortality, homicide, and violence than the so-called red states, where fundamentalism claims to have made its beachhead. What we name things really matters. Since 9/11 in 2001, there have been more than 20 arsons and attempted arsons at abortion providers, 10 bombings and attempted bombings, and multiple clinics in 23 states have received threats of personal assault and anthrax and chemical attacks, none of which were called terrorism. A woman's abortion rights are under assault from every quarter of the right wing, the religious right wing, with the Supreme Court ready to teeter right over the edge. So-called faith-based prisons are proliferating, as much to reap profits as to spread the gospel to a captive audience. Taxpayers unwittingly finance such proselytizing prisons, where inmates only receive special privileges if they follow all day, all week Christian agendas. In New Mexico, the state contracted with the Corrections Corporation of America, the largest private prison provider, who provides workbooks for women prisoners that emphasize obedience under such headings as yielding rights and proper submission. But hey, who reads the Constitution anymore? Well, time to revisit an old yet crucial and still overlooked subject: religious establishments. Our educational system certainly does not draw our attention to the fact that the Constitution contains not one reference to a deity on purpose. Nor do we know that Thomas Jefferson's original draft of the Declaration of Independence did not mention endowed by their Creator, but read, "We hold these truths to be sacred and undeniable, that all men," yeah, he did say men, "are created equal and independent, that from that equal creation they derive in rights inherent and unalienable, among which are the preservation of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness." And when he referred to nature's God, he deliberately meant the philosophy of the Enlightenment. Of course, Jefferson also wrote, "Question with boldness even the existence of God." He was right in step with James Madison, who wrote, "Religious bondage shackles and debilitates the mind," and also with Ben Franklin, who proclaimed, "I doubt of revelation itself." Neither our schools nor our media teach us that "In God We Trust" was never on our currency until the anti-communist craze of the 1950s, and that "Under God" wasn't wedged into the Pledge of Allegiance until the same period. So we don't know that the U.S. Treaty of Tripoli, initiated by George Washington and signed into law by John Adams, declares, quote, "The government of the United States of America is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion," close quote. Or that Jefferson roared, quote, "We may safely affirm, though contradicted by all the judges and writers on earth, that Christianity neither is nor ever was a part of the common law," period, close quote. John Adams wrote, I almost shudder at the thought of alluding to the most fatal example of the abuses of grief which the history of mankind has preserved, the cross. Consider what calamities that engine of grief has produced. He wrote that in a letter to Jefferson, who himself repeatedly attacked religion as superstition and who referred to the clerical establishment as cannibal priests, and who, in an 1823 letter to Adams, wrote, "The day will come when the mystical generation of Jesus, by the Supreme Being as his Father in the womb of a virgin, will be classed with the fable of the generation of Minerva in the brain of Jupiter." But how many Americans know that Jefferson clearly wrote he did not believe in the Trinity or in the divinity of Christ, though he respected the moral teachings of whoever might have been a historical Jesus and ranked him with Socrates? Jefferson even cut up parts of a copy of the New Testament and reassembled them to rescue the principles from which Jesus might have taught, to separate them, quote, "from the artificial vestments in which they have been muffled by priests," close quote. The Jefferson Bible is still available in a 1989 edition. As for Jefferson's close friend James Madison, he was on fire over this subject. The wording in Madison's first draft of the First Amendment, delivered in a speech in the House of Representatives in 1789, was both more specific and more inclusive than the final version. It read, "The civil rights of none shall be abridged on account of religious belief or worship, nor shall any national religion be established, nor shall the full and equal rights of conscience be in any manner or on any pretext infringed." He also accurately predicted, quote, "the danger of ecclesiastical corporations," noting that they had directed, quote, "a spiritual tyranny on the ruins of the civil authority. They have been seen upholding the thrones of political tyranny, and in no instance have they been guardians of the liberties of the people. Rulers who wish to subvert the public liberty may have found an established clergy lenient auxiliaries. A just government needs them not." These quotes are from his writings entitled Memorial and Remonstrance Against Religious Assessments. Similarly, in his 1817 Monopolies, Perpetuities, Corporations, and Ecclesiastical Endowments, Madison writes, "The growing wealth acquired by all of them never fails to be a source of abuses." But he doesn't stop there. Quote, "Establishment of the chaplainship to Congress is a palpable violation of equal rights as well as of constitutional principles. Better also to disarm in the same way the precedent of chaplainships for the Army and Navy than erect them into a political authority in matters of religion. Religious proclamations by the executive branch recommending thanksgivings and fasts are shoots from the same root with legislative acts, as they imply a religious agency making no part of the trust delegated to political rulers, and such acts seem to imply and certainly nourish the erroneous idea of a national religion. A theocracy having been improperly adopted by so many nations which have embraced Christianity is apt to look in even the bosoms of Americans." Even of Americans, yeah. Most people today think of the First Amendment as ensuring freedom of speech. Actually, the opening words of the First Amendment are, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof." The presidential oath of office, as specified verbatim in the Constitution, makes absolutely no mention of a deity. On the contrary, the founders deliberately noted the vow could be sworn as an oath or simply affirmed, a radical notion for the time. All those "so help me gods" They sneaked in over the centuries. As for later generations, Lincoln's own first draft of the Emancipation Proclamation made no mention at all of any deity, but he caved under pressure and added the words, "the greatest favor of Almighty God." Similarly, the words "under God" do not appear in either his first or second draft of the Gettysburg Address. Well, I could go on, explaining that the myth that U.S. law is based on the Ten Commandments is simply that, a myth. Or I could trace the history of the three tests, the tests that evolved from various Supreme Court decisions over time in order to decide the constitutionality of laws that have a religious component. Or I might note statements from the generally acknowledged greatest justices of the Supreme Court on keeping the Constitution safe from religion. Then again, wait, I already did that, back when I first researched and compiled the book, Fighting Words, a toolkit for combating the religious right, in hopes of feeding our hunger for these facts presented with the soundbite brevity of modern communications. A little book, a cheap book, a source to pull from your pocket and brandish. Our enforced collective ignorance is so great that we absolutely have to revisit this subject again and again and again, reminding ourselves and each other of the founders, who, with all their faults, and they were many, were not the dusty, pompous old men in powdered wigs we were taught about, but who were real-life revolutionaries. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag Fighting Words. That's our show for this week. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and now Instagram at The Robin Morgan, and you can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net and find my latest book of poems, Dark Matter, and my brand new novel, Parallax, wherever books are sold. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us again next time on Women's Media Center Live.